Welcome to Databricks for Free and Code-Free Visualizations. My name is Brian Kafferke. I'm a data and AI solutions consultant. So if you're looking for somebody who's a deep dive person on big data, small data, and any type of data, as well as out of analytics and data science, I'm your person. And drinking out of my Python mug today. People never see it because I always drink out of my left hand, so it's usually not visible. But I am drinking out of my Python mug. I have our mugs. I have Star Trek mugs. So I'm kind of a coffee mug person. A lot of different ones here. You can get the examples I'm going to use on github.com. You can see at the bottom here, github.com/bkafaki/shared. I have a ton of shared content for all my YouTube videos. Please share. Subscribe, please. It's always good to see subscribers. It kind of gives me motivation to do more videos. I am focused a lot on big data and analytics. That's my sort of passion in life now. And as anybody at Databricks and Microsoft knows by now, I got excited about Databricks as soon as they crossed over the threshold and formed a service on Azure Databricks. But what I want to talk about today is something you may not know, which is you can get Databricks for free. That's right, you can get it for free from Databricks. It's called the Community Edition. I'm going to show how to do that. And I'm also going to show you how to do code-free visualization. So I'm putting the two free together. I think it was Reese's Cups that said two great things that go great together. These are two things that go great together. So if you're not familiar with Databricks and what it is, then let me just give you a synopsis. In the Wayback World, you had Hadoop. Hadoop MapReduce was eventually kind of replaced by Spark. And I don't say replaced, but it's definitely taken over the world. Apache Spark is an open source project that allows you to do massive scale of machine learning, data wrangling, analytics, etc. You're probably familiar with Spark. You've probably heard of it. The people who wrote Spark, two of them founded a company called Databricks. Databricks, although they do a lot of work with Microsoft on the Azure Databricks merger, they also run Databricks on AWS, and they also have their own cloud platform. So Databricks is a separate company, but the people at Databricks, they do a huge amount of the open source development, architecture, etc. work around Spark. There's a very close collaboration, and I have to hand it to the people at Databricks because they give a ton back to the open source community. And I was impressed even when there's a thing called Data Lake Delta, and they made that open source, which I was really excited to see. So they're definitely very interested in extending the open source world. And the Databricks side, though, is a commercial part where it's for profit. But they give a lot back here with the community edition. So let's jump in and talk about why this is so cool and exciting, and one of the best deals. Free is always a good deal, right? So let me jump out here for a minute and I'll show you how to get in and take advantage. So I'm in my browser here. I'm searching in the ubiquitous Google. You could use Bing or whatever you want. I'm going to use Google. Search for Databricks Community, this Community Edition. Now you get a lot of things here. You could probably get to it a number of ways. Easiest way is to do this one link you'll get here, Try Databricks. Okay, so click on Try Databricks. And not surprisingly, this is the thing you're called attention to, and you might not notice over to the right this other option. So this is the free trial, but that's only 14 days. It does give you more features, but if you're just looking to learn, you want something that maybe also just something that's extremely useful. My daughter's in university right now, and I'm telling you, you should just use like the Community Edition to explore data, to play around. Now you have limits, but this is a pretty good limit, 6 GB. You on a cluster. That's a pretty good amount of memory. I mean, you're not going to be doing petabytes. There's no genomics going on here, but definitely you can do a lot with that. You can do notebooks. Now, Databricks notebooks I'm going to show you because it's really cool. That's my sort of second part of this riveting demo. And then you've eliminated 3 users, etc., and you can share your work. That's great. Just click here to get started. Now, here's the best part. Unlike most environments, if you go to like Azure or other places or AWS, they always want a credit card. Like in case you go over and they say they won't, I like the fact that this does not ask you for a credit card. It does not expire. I've had my account for Community Edition, and I'm really, thank you Databricks for having this because it's great for demos. I use it if I'm trying to do like a workshop, and sometimes people don't have accounts, they can't use credit cards. The Community Edition is a free place to work. And most of what you'd want to do, whether you're using Databricks on AWS or Azure, 90% of it is going to be the same. The parts that will be different, of course, are the specific things that you would do in those environments. If you're trying to go to Azure Blob Storage, or you Cosmos DB or Azure SQL, those definitely will be different. But you're probably going to be also using certain standard similar things like using the JDBC anyway. So even that will be somewhat similar. All right, so you fill this all out. You decide if you want to get notifications of emails, etc. Prove you are not a robot. You just check you're not a robot. Sign up. When you're done, you notice it wants your email. So you can put your email there, and then you will they'll send you an email. Make sure it might go to your spam folder, junk folder, so check there, because I had that happen one time and it was really confusing. So just check that. Once you get there, you can go on a link and you're good to go. You just start right in there. All right, so what I'm going to do now is back here for a minute. And I'm going to go to here, and I can actually just jump right in. Oops, not what I wanted. There it is, login. Now for me, since I already have an account, it's actually saved my credentials here on my machine because I said to. And you're in the Databricks portal. I call it a portal. It's their GUI. It looks a lot like Azure portal, but it's not. It's Databricks specific. And you notice up here, it shows me that I am in the community edition, etc. So this is great. And you can see I have the typical thing here. You can get, all kinds of help, etc. You can get the home folder, and I've got different stuff created in here, so that's great. And the number one thing I'm going to need right off the bat is to have a cluster. Now I have one running. I'm going to leave that, but to create a cluster, all you would have to do is say create cluster, give it a name. It could literally be name, okay, whatever you want to call it. It defaults. Now you'll notice it's not asking you about how many nodes do you want, which it normally would do, because you're only going to get the driver node. You're getting the head node. That's it. You're going to get one node to work with, standalone. That's it. You can see here, as I said, you got your one driver, 6 gig. Again, that's pretty good. I have to give them credit. Sorry, I didn't want to do that. So you get that, and then you just say create. Now I already have a cluster created, saves us time waiting. Also, you can only use Python 3 on this newer version. You've got other versions. You can go in here and pick a different Databricks runtime. Databricks uses its own runtime. It's riding on Spark, but it has optimizations. It has all kinds of cool features, so you can do that. So let's go. Now that we have a cluster, and actually I do, because you can see here YouTube 1 is here. Now that I've got a cluster running, it will time out after 2 hours. And one thing I've noticed a little bit odd in this particular thing, if you were on like Azure, you could restart a cluster you have. You can't do that here. You just got to basically create a new one when you come in again, but it doesn't give you any trouble with that. So now we're going to bring up some data, right? We need something to start using. So I've got the default database, I've got AW, etc. But the first thing I need to do, and you can see I've uploaded a lot of stuff, I played a lot around with AdventureWorks. I'm going to bring up some data. Now there's two ways we can use data right off the bat. I want to focus on using, because I want to get to my second part of my presentation. You already got to the community edition. It's free. You're good to go. I want to also show you how you can create powerful visualizations and explore data without any code. So this is pretty cool. Now, when you upload data, it automatically is going to go into your Databricks file system, which is a local storage. In Azure, it's blob storage. I don't know what it's using here, but it's basically it's a file system, and you can treat it like that. So that's the path to your files. We'll see that, how we use that. And we can also then choose to visually create or in code create the definitions for SQL tables. So I'm going to upload all of these. And it took me a while to figure out that you can upload multiple files at the same time. I actually was using this for a while before I realized you can. But you can do that. Just select the files you want, say open, and you notice it automatically is uploading these. Now here's the trick. They are now uploaded, but you don't have tables defined. So if you want to do SQL against it, you can't. Spark SQL wouldn't be available yet for these. Now normally you can say create table with UI, or you can do this notebook. This part, as far as I can see in my experimentation, this never works with multiple tables. So if you wanted to use the GUI to create a SQL table for each one of your files, you're going to have to do it one at a time. But I'm going to show you a better way, a code way of doing it, and we'll get into that now. But we've got our files up here. And this data is coming from courtesy of Microsoft's AdventureWorks. That's their dummy data, that development education data. It's a complete database, etc. So I extracted some data for that to use here just to demonstrate. And now I'm going to go to my workspace, and workspaces is a sort of a logical file structure for storing things. And so we're in the overall Databricks area is called a workspace, but also within it, when you create folders and things, that's considered like within the workspace. So what I want to do now is go here. I'm going to go to my YouTube folder. And the first thing I want to do is create tables. So let's go in here. Now, if you want documentation here, it has quick start here, link to Databricks, read that, etc. Again, I love Databricks. It's awesome, great product. What I'm going to do is create a database. So when I work with SQL on Spark, I can treat it very similar to using like SQL Server or a Postgres or any of those things you might have used. It does not, at this time at least, store, you don't keep stored procedures and then artifacts, and it is a schema on read generally, although you can now use Data Lake Delta and other methods to make it much more like a persisted storage the way you would a SQL database. But we're just going to make it really easy. We're just going to query. So I'm going to create this database, which does not exist yet. And you'll notice it's going out to Spark. It's telling it's getting execution context. One of the things you'll notice in Databricks is you don't need to create your SC, your Spark session, etc. I'll give you a quick detour. If I do this, it won't show me it. Try it this way. Sorry, Python. It should show me it. SC and session, you can see it there. Session and SC are actually Spark session and SC are pre-configured and installed. So if you're looking to use this the way you would just for Spark, you don't really care much about the Databricks features, then just be aware that you don't have to create an SC context. Databricks takes care of that in these notebooks. And this is, I've got videos on Databricks notebooks, so go look at that if you're not familiar. Really powerful stuff. It's very similar to Jupyter notebooks or something, but more like Zeppelin. And the beauty of these notebooks is while you have a default language, you'll notice I was able to code a Python cell by using the Python magic. I can do R, I can do Python, I can do SQL, Java, all in the same notebook. It doesn't support Java directly. You have to do it as jar files, but it does have all that great stuff. And Scala, of course. So now I want to set my context in my database as I would if I was SQL Server saying use. So I'm going to change to that database, use YouTube. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a table if it exists. I'm going to create a new table, and just in case it's already there, I'll drop it, even though it doesn't exist. Creating a new table. It's a CSV file, and then I give it the path. Now remember I said this is when it uploaded. That's the default path. So when you do an upload like this, remember this. You can get this notebook on GitHub. And this has a mixed case CSV file name. I like that better for the files, but I do not use it on my tables just so it's kind of easy to query. Now by saying header equal true, it means that the first row in these CSV files is the column name. Use that as a column name. And then first schema equal true says that when you see the data types in the data, you'll have to parse through it, ask Spark to look at it on the load. It will figure out that's an integer, that's a string, etc. Now be aware, if you're bringing up really large files, that may be a bit of a tough way to go. You can also force the schema, just define it, but taking the lazy way out. In programming, lazy is good, so let's go with that. All right, so you can see Spark ran some stuff. You can go in there and all that good stuff. And I'm going to just prove the magic of it. We now have a table, right? We can use select against it. And all it took was this one statement. So I'm going to create a few more. One for customer. Again, this is all from AdventureWorks. It's product information. They sell bikes, mostly bikes. I think like 90% of what I've seen in sales is bikes. But it's like sportswear kind of stuff, sports products. And we'll get the sales, their internet sales. Again, the same thing over and over again in each time. And if I run this, I had a test database. You can see now we have these databases. Now I'm going to do something. I'm going to clear my output, clear results. So you can see I'll run the show tables again. And if I want to do just see what's in internet sales, you can see that here. And that's great. So now, I had something in here. I'm going to go into another demo, which is DB Community. And this notebook will let me show you a little bit more about it. So this notebook, I'm just showing you that if you were in a Python notebook or something, you'd have to use the %SQL magic to tell the notebook you want to do SQL commands, and use database is one of those commands. So I'll rerun that because I'm in a new notebook. And notice we do have to have our cluster connected. So that'll set my database context. Okay. Now I'm going to run a simple query. We've uploaded these. We are now, oh, wait a minute, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube. Now we can run a query against this. And you can see I can do joins, etc. I can use keys, so it's really handy. The limit, that's standard SQL. I can limit this to 5 rows back to save myself all that good stuff. So pretty cool. Now I'm going to do something really cool here also. If you want a full explanation of how to use SQL on Databricks, I have a video on that, so please check that out as well. And if I haven't already said so, please subscribe, like, share, etc. I'd like to get these out to as many people as possible. A lot of people, I worked at Microsoft until recently, and I know Databricks is an extremely popular service there. All right, so going to create a new view, create a replace view. We're going to call it vCust Sales, and we're going to basically join the two tables together. Now I'm only taking sales amount from the sales table because if I took asterisks from both, one, it's data I don't need, but two, and you don't ever want to select more data than you need in any kind of situation, especially at scale on Spark. So identifying columns is a good idea when you're not just playing around. The C dot asterisk says get me all the customer. The other problem is you can't have duplicate column names, so I'd have to work around that and make sure I don't have like hit a lot of key overlaps here. Customer key is the name one. So let me run that. And what's nice is now I have a view. That's the query to support that view, and I can treat that view just like a table. Now I could save this as a table as well. I could actually say create table as, select from, etc. But you can see I've got this here, which is great. Now let's just say, now that I've got that, I'm going to show you what this is all building up to is code-free analysis. So I'm going to run select asterisk from cust sales. I could have done it directly from fact internet sales, but there's not a lot of useful grouping columns and things in that. It's mostly keys that are designed to get you somewhere else, like the customer. So I just did a simple query to create something a little more useful. Now I had this was actually here earlier from playing around, but this is what you'll get. You'll see this here, and it's all the data from that table. Now let's take a look at a few things I want to call your attention to. This is something most people, and including myself to be honest, I overlook the power of the display functionality in the Databricks notebook. Display is a function that you can use around pandas, data frames, R data frames, etc., and it will leverage the same functionality I'm showing you here. It will bring up this grid. It'll let you do visuals. It's really a very powerful feature that I think often gets overlooked, and what it's doing is not often explained. It's vaguely touched on in the Databricks documentation. So let me explain. It's only to bring the data to see in this visual, it's going to have to bring it back to the driver node. And the problem with bringing it back to the driver node is, and mind you, we only have a driver node because this is community edition, but in a large cluster, I could get into trouble if I tried to bring all of the data back. Suppose it was 1 trillion rows and I've only got 50 megabytes available on my driver node, gonna crash the cluster. So Databricks is smart about that and says, okay, I know you asked for this, I'll give you a little sample. And if I go here and go to the end, notice it stops, but then it gives me more. That's interesting. And then I go down again. It does again. It's actually paging. It's bringing 1,000 rows at a time back to me. As far as I can tell, that's what it's doing. However, there's more than 1,000 rows here, quite a few more. And in a real world scenario, if this was a distributed cluster, it could be billions of rows, right? So Databricks is really doing you a big favor by doing that. What you would want to do if you don't want it to do that, if you needed detail rows, then try to filter it down, maybe do a sample, etc. And that's in my other videos. But alas, that's not what I'm here to talk about. So let's go to the visuals, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to say, let's go to plot options, I should say. And what I want to do is, I'm going to clear everything out because I want to start from scratch. What I'm interested in doing is analyzing sales. So the first thing I want to know is, the values is going to be sales amount. And one of the things that would be interesting is, I think you saw this already was here, but I wanted to know, where is it? The commute distance, okay? Now this is really a pretty cool thing, right? I've got commute distance, sales, and I can say stacked, or I can say grouped. I like the group better. And you can see what's going on here. Now, notice that I can set different things. This was set to average. I'm going to set it to sum, so that's total sales, and I'm very quickly getting a nice picture of how far people need to commute to work and bike buying, because 99% of the sales happens to be bikes. Now, here's the really interesting part. It says sum, and I say apply. and then watch. It reran my Spark command. It's sending a new query to the cluster. I didn't code a new query. It did it for me. And this is one of the most powerful things about the Databricks notebooks that is often overlooked. Wow, this is actually now representative of the real data. And you can see here, it's aggregated by sum in the back end. So Databricks is telling you, yeah, we know you want to do this. And if we didn't do this, if we just did it over 1,000 rows, which is actually something I was confused myself about. I thought, wow, that's not very useful if it's only doing that on 1,000 rows. But no, when you say apply, it's going to resubmit your query. And actually, I'm not looking at the asterisks from cost sales anymore. I'm looking at an aggregation of the sum based on what I set for plot options. So now I'm getting the sum by commute distance. Now the nice thing about that is I'm going to reduce the amount going back to the driver, because again, it has to come back to the driver to do this visual, but it's doing a sum. So based on the commute distance, I only have, you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 5 different commute distances. So if you think sum sales amount by commute distance, I'm getting 5 rows back, not a problem. Bear in mind, I haven't tried this, so you could try it if you want, but imagine you had something like 6 million customers and you decided, or 20 million customers or a trillion, and then you said do something sum sales by customer. Be careful there, because if Databricks may try to go out, I'm guessing it may page it to 1,000, it may cap it, but just be aware that that's coming back, so you don't want to necessarily do that. But this is really cool because I can say, okay, that's neat to see the sum. I can clearly see that the bulk of people who buy my bikes are 5 to 10 miles from work. And that's actually kind of interesting because that's a pretty bike rideable distance, which may mean a lot of people are buying bikes to commute to work, which is really good to know. However, maybe I really want to see the average and apply. Now, it shows me a quick representation, but watch again. I asked for a new aggregate. I don't have that aggregate. So it's going to run the query again. Bear in mind, this can be a little resource intensive, all right? It's not for the trite of heart. So play with it, use it. On the Community Edition, have at it. I mean, it's free. Go at it, have a good time. This is really useful. I was trying to explain, if you're in college or something especially, you need to do some quick analysis. Somebody's asking you, tell us what's going on. What's the pattern in the data? I can do all this with almost no coding. So not completely no coding. I do need to make sure I have the SQL tables, but I'm not even doing Python or anything here. But mind you, once you create SQL tables in Databricks, those tables are available to R, Python, Scala, because that SQL interface is available to all the APIs, at least all the SQL data frame APIs. Okay. So this is great, and I can then say, okay, that's really good, but I'm going to change this to a pie chart. Now, move that here. Looks better. Now I apply here, and notice it didn't need to reaggregate, so it's smart enough to know that, yeah, it's the same data, I'm just showing it differently. So again, it's not running the query in that case. But again, I could say, I'd rather see this by count, apply, and it has to run the query. So here's a takeaway I would suggest. While that is powerful and that's great and certainly good for playing around and on the Community Edition, but if you're doing something on the cluster and it is big data, you want to consider ways to bring back only what you need. Now, the visuals are great, but in this case, for instance, I know that I want to say, in this case, query by education. I'm curious, like, what are the education levels of the people who buy our product? So here I'm doing a sum of sales. I'm getting a count, and I'm going to change the name of that to number, so I can do as. I'm going to do average, min, max. And I'm going to group it by English education, but I'm renaming education because they had several language versions. I'm just going to focus on English because that's all I really speak. I'm sorry about that. wish I knew. I tried Spanish. I do know a little of that. That's about it. Okay, so you can see here now I've had this plot that it defined. And an interesting thing about visuals in the notebooks is it will remember the visuals. So you can reset that, rerun the queries, change the data around and stuff, and it's really good about remembering what you last did. So here I've got education, the average sales amount, and number, and it's splitting it up and showing me multiple visuals. I can say apply. Notice it didn't run back and run the query in the back end. Why is that? Because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe a couple more. Nope. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 5 rows. These are the different levels of education. 5 rows is really easy for the driver node to handle. I would hope it can handle at least that. So the takeaway from that is don't. Interesting, it changed that. I would have to because I flipped back, but I can go back to my pie chart. What I wanted to emphasize here, though, is that try to think ahead sometimes. If you know you're going to use a lot of data over and over again, you can create a view to simplify things. You can create a table and write to the table. You can just say create table as and then select a view, data into it, and you can have a temporary table. It's actually as permanent as you want. There's lots of options there, but then you can just query the table over and over, and that would be a subset of the data, which is going to save you sitting around waiting time as well as resources in the real world. So you can do that as well. In this case, I'm like, well, I really like to be able to experiment with different types of aggregations. So I'm letting SQL do it once, and then I can play with my plot options here, as you saw. I could change this to, no, a scatter plot works, not very interesting. Pie chart, I think I did that, yeah. Bar chart we saw. All that kind of stuff. I can apply it again. So that's the takeaway from this particular use. So the two big things I focused on here, and I'm one of my shortest videos to date. I'm trying to do better as far as talking. But anyway, what I'd like to suggest, one, take advantage of Databricks Community Edition. You may, even if you already have a paid account on a web, cloud service or something, this is really handy because you can get to it from anywhere, right? And it's not going to cost you anything. So it's great, like I said, when I've done quick classes, quick workshops on Databricks, I'll usually use this as my sort of go-to default to get people in, because sometimes the other environments is like, oh, my company has too tight a security, it won't let me get to it. There's quota limits. I hit a limit just the other day on Azure where I tried to create a cluster. It was a really small cluster, and it's saying we're having trouble in this, region. I think it was related to my actual, it said that my allowed allocations wouldn't let me create another VM. So there were issues there, and I said, you know what, I need to play around with something. So I went into the Community Edition and was able to keep going. Again, Community Edition is not for production work. It is not for day-to-day real usage. As long as your data is not secure, it's great for learning. It's good for any kind of educational environment where the data is public or not secure. But definitely, this is not a place to put anyone's financial or healthcare data or anything like that. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Keep coding Python. It's, I think, my favorite language now on Spark. And please subscribe, like, share, and until next time, thank you.